The World Rally Championship has seen some of the fastest cars and bravest drivers ever. But behind the roar of turbochargers and gravel dust lies a series of stories so disturbing they'd never make it into a Netflix documentary. Henri Toivonen's final run. In 1986, the World Rally Championship was at the peak of its most dangerous era. Group B cars were essentially unrestricted missiles on wheels. Over 500 horsepower, minimal safety features, and speeds that pushed the limits of human reaction time. And nobody piloted these monsters with more natural talent than Henri Toivonen. The 29-year-old Finnish driver was considered a generational talent. Behind the wheel of the Lancia Delta S4, a car so powerful its turbo and supercharger combination made it nearly uncontrollable, Toivonen was redefining what was possible in rally. But on May 2nd, 1986, during the Tour de Corse in Corsica, everything changed. Toivonen and his co-driver Sergio Cresto were navigating a seemingly routine left-hand bend when their Lancia veered off the narrow mountain road, plunged down a ravine, and burst into flames. The magnesium-bodied car burned so intensely that by the time rescue crews arrived, there was almost nothing left. Both men were burned beyond recognition. The tragedy's darkest element was Toivonen's prophetic warning to journalists just days before. "The cars are too fast," he said. "Nobody can control them properly." He'd been suffering from flu during the rally, taking medication that made him drowsy, yet the pressure to perform meant he kept driving. His death wasn't just a racing accident, it was the inevitable result of a sport that had pushed too far too fast. Within hours of the crash, FISA, now the FIA, announced the end of Group B. The most spectacular era of rallying was killed off overnight, but the cost had been far too high. The Attilio Bettega cover-up. 1 year before Toivonen's fatal crash, another Lancia driver met a similar fate on the same rally. Attilio Bettega was piloting the Lancia 037 through the Corsican mountains when he lost control and slammed sideways into a tree. The impact was directly on the driver's door, killing Bettega instantly while his co-driver Maurizio Parisino walked away unharmed. The disturbing aftermath revealed Lancia's priorities. Rather than acknowledging fundamental safety issues with the 037's design, which had minimal side impact protection, Lancia publicly blamed driver error. Internal documents later revealed that engineers had identified structural weaknesses in the car's tubular frame months earlier. But competitive pressures meant these concerns were shelved. Even more troubling was the decision to continue the rally. While Bettega's body was still being recovered, other competitors were sent through the same stage. The show, as they say, had to go on. Several drivers, including Walter Röhrl, later admitted they were horrified by this decision but felt powerless to protest. The rally world quickly moved on, and Bettega became just another statistic in the deadly Group B era. But for those inside Lancia, his death represented a warning sign that went deliberately unheeded, a decision that would cost more lives just 12 months later. The Marco Alén Championship that never was. Imagine winning the World Championship, celebrating with your team, only to have the title stripped away weeks later for reasons entirely beyond your control. That's exactly what happened to Finnish driver Marco Alén in 1986. After Henri Toivonen's fatal crash, the FIA was under immense pressure to act. Group B was banned effective immediately for the following season, but the current championship continued. Alén, driving for Lancia, battled Peugeot's Juha Kankkunen all season in a nail-biting title fight. At the season-ending Rally Olympus in the United States, Alén finished ahead of Kankkunen, securing enough points to be crowned world champion. For 11 days, Marco Alén was the 1986 World Rally Champion. The team celebrated. Magazines printed special editions. Alén even did interviews as the new champion. If you want more stories like these, the ones motorsport history tried to forget, hit subscribe and like. It really helps the channel. Then came the bombshell. The FIA, in a controversial closed-door meeting, decided to retroactively annul the results of the San Remo rally, where Peugeot had been disqualified for using illegal side skirts. The official reason was to restore sporting equity, but many suspected political motivations involving French influence within the FIA, as Peugeot was a French manufacturer. The recalculated points meant Kankkunen was now champion, and Alén's title was erased from history. Alén was devastated. They took away something that can never be replaced: he later said. Despite competing for another decade, he never won another championship. The scandal exposed rally's political underbelly. It wasn't just about driving skill, but power, influence, and backroom deals that could rewrite history after the fact. The Vatanen near-death experience. Ari Vatanen was at the height of his powers in 1985. The Finnish driver had won 4 rallies that season in his Peugeot 205 T16 and was leading the championship when he arrived at the Argentina rally. What happened next would change his life forever. On a fast section of stage 4, Vatanen's Peugeot hit a dip in the road at over 120 miles per hour. The car became airborne, landed awkwardly, and rolled multiple times before coming to rest in a crumpled heap. Vatanen suffered a broken vertebra, ribs, and severe internal injuries. His heart stopped twice during emergency surgery. Doctors gave him a 50% chance of survival. The invisible wounds proved most devastating. Vatanen suffered from severe depression and post-traumatic stress, so debilitating that he couldn't even watch rally footage without experiencing panic attacks. "I died in that accident," he later said. "The person who came back was someone else." His recovery took nearly 2 years, and when he did return to rallying, he was never the same driver. The fearlessness that had defined his style was gone. In its place was a new caution, a hesitation that separated the pre-accident Vatanen from the man who returned. The sport offered no proper support system, no psychological help. Vatanen was expected to either recover and drive again or disappear quietly. The human cost of rallying's dangers was treated as an unfortunate side effect rather than a fundamental problem that needed addressing. The Colin McRae helicopter crash. Colin McRae wasn't just a rally driver. He was rally royalty. The 1995 world champion's aggressive, no-holds-barred driving style made him a fan favorite and turned his name into a global brand with the Colin McRae Rally video game series. But on September 15th, 2007, McRae's life ended in circumstances that eerily mirrored his driving style, pushing the limits in a machine he loved. McRae was piloting his Eurocopter Squirrel helicopter near his home in Lanark, Scotland, with his 5-year-old son Johnny and 2 family friends on board. Witnesses described seeing the helicopter performing low-level maneuvers before it crashed into a wooded valley and burst into flames. All 4 occupants were killed instantly. The subsequent investigation determined that McRae had been flying too low and too fast, taking unnecessary risks that led directly to the crash. The bitter irony haunted the rally community. The very traits that made McRae a legendary driver, his fearlessness and willingness to push boundaries, ultimately led to disaster when transferred to another high-risk activity. And his decision didn't just cost him his life, it took his young son and 2 other innocent people with him. The rally world lost not just a legend, but also potentially the next generation of the McRae dynasty. Johnny had already shown interest in following his father's footsteps. The McRae family was left to deal with an unimaginable double loss, while the sport lost one of its greatest ambassadors in circumstances that raised uncomfortable questions about the personality traits that make great rally drivers. The Richard Burns brain tumor. In 2003, Richard Burns was on top of the world. The previous year, he had become the first Englishman to win the World Rally Championship. Methodical, precise, and intelligent, Burns was the thinking man's rally driver. The perfect counterpoint to the wild aggression of rivals like Colin McRae. But as he prepared for the 2003 Wales Rally GB, something wasn't right. On the drive to the event, Burns suddenly felt unwell and lost consciousness. He was rushed to the hospital where doctors delivered the devastating news. He had a brain tumor. What followed was a battle far tougher than any rally. Burns immediately withdrew from competition to focus on treatment. The tumor was astrocytoma, an aggressive form that offered limited treatment options. Despite the best medical care, Burns' condition deteriorated rapidly. The cruel timing made his story particularly heartbreaking. Burns had signed a deal to return to Subaru for the 2004 season, reuniting with the team where he had won his championship. It should have been his triumphant return. Instead, he spent that year fighting for his life, away from the public eye, as the rally world continued without him. On November 25th, 2005, exactly 4 years to the day after winning his world championship, Richard Burns died. He was just 34 years old. His passing received a fraction of the media attention that McRae's more spectacular death would generate 2 years later, despite Burns achieving the same championship success. Burns' story represents the silent tragedy, not the spectacular crash or the headline-grabbing accident, but the random cruelty of fate that can strike anyone, even those at the peak of their powers. The Michèle Mouton tragedy. Michèle Mouton wasn't just the most successful female rally driver in history, she was one of the greatest drivers, period. In 1982, driving the fearsome Audi Quattro, she came within a whisker of becoming World Rally Champion, winning 3 events and pushing Walter Röhrl to the final round. Her story is remarkable enough, a woman dominating in perhaps the most male-dominated motorsport during its most dangerous era. But what few people know is the personal tragedy that shaped her career's end. In 1986, as Group B was reaching its spectacular conclusion, Mouton was still competing at the highest level. But away from the stages, she was dealing with her father's terminal illness. Pierre Mouton had been Michèle's biggest supporter, the one who had encouraged her to race when many thought a woman had no place in rallying. As his condition worsened, Mouton made the difficult decision to retire from full-time competition at the end of the season to spend time with him. Just days after she announced her retirement, Pierre passed away. His final wish had been to see his daughter become the first woman to win the World Championship, a dream that would remain unfulfilled. The poignancy of Mouton's story lies in how her rallying career was bookended by her father. He gave her first car and encouraged her to race, and his illness brought her full-time career to a premature end. While she would compete occasionally in the years that followed, including winning the Pikes Peak Hill climb, fans were left to wonder what might have been if she had continued at her peak. In a sport defined by its tragedies, Mouton's story represents a different kind of loss. Not the spectacular crash or the fatal accident, but the quiet sacrifice of a career at its height for something more important: the Subaru factory team's dark final chapter. For a generation of rally fans, Subaru's blue and gold cars were the iconic image of the World Rally Championship. From 1990 to 2008, the Japanese manufacturer was a cornerstone of the sport, winning 3 Constructors' Championships and 3 Drivers' titles with Colin McRae, Richard Burns and Petter Solberg. Then, on December 16, 2008, came the bombshell announcement. Subaru was withdrawing from the WRC, effective immediately. The official reason given was the global financial crisis. But behind the scenes, a much darker story was unfolding. What wasn't widely reported was that Subaru's withdrawal came just weeks after the team's technical director had been found dead in what appeared to be a suicide. The pressure within the team had reached breaking point. After years of dominance in the late 1990s and early 2000s, Subaru had fallen behind Citroën and Ford. The 2008 season had been particularly disappointing, with no wins and mounting pressure from Japan to deliver results. The technical director's death sent shockwaves through the team. Many staff members were already dealing with mental health issues due to the relentless schedule and pressure. The human cost of competing at the highest level had become too great. Subaru's parent company, Fuji Heavy Industries, used the financial crisis as a convenient public explanation. But insiders knew the truth. The team had become a toxic environment where results mattered more than people. This final chapter reveals the hidden cost behind motorsport's glossy exterior. While fans saw only the cars on stages, behind the scenes people were breaking under the strain. A stark reminder that for all the glamour associated with World Championship motorsport, it's still an environment that can push people beyond their limits, sometimes with tragic consequences. Enjoyed this? For more stories Netflix wouldn't dare to tell, hit subscribe and keep the engine running.